Well, I'm excited today to have with me John Tobon, who is adjunct professor at FIU in the Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs, and of course, also well known to all of us at ACAMS as the former assistant director, countering transnational organized crime division of Homeland Security Investigations. Welcome, John. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for the invite. Always good to collaborate with ACAMS.
So what I want to do today is talk a little bit about the upcoming LATAM conference, and basically to make this sort of a way for people to have a sense of really kind of what are the raging issues in Latin America. And I know you're going to do 3 different panels, and then there's some other topics. And I guess what I'd like to do is kind of talk about what you see as the big issues associated with each of the panels that you're going to do for the LATAM conference, which is in Cancun, coming up in Cancun. And then also maybe to talk about some of the areas you have such a rich background in fighting financial crime, and then maybe talk about some of the other things that are not your topics, but you can say a little bit why they're important. So let's go.
Awesome.
What I first wanted to talk about is, I think this is an issue everywhere, but it's particularly an issue in Latin America. And maybe you can say something about how it's manifest in Latin America. And what I'm talking about, I know you're going to do a panel on Chinese underground banking. What does it mean when we say Chinese underground banking, and what's at stake? What's being done in the name of or by Chinese underground bankers?
Yeah, Chinese underground banking actually predates the modern financial system. And a lot of the tactics developed by this system many, many centuries ago were adopted by the financial system. That means that a lot of the things that are happening in the financial system today mirror what happens in Chinese underground banking. In terms of Latin America, the risk really comes in a couple of things. Number one is Chinese policy, which is expanding through the Belt and Road Initiative and some of the other published policies that are expanding Chinese influence, not just through Latin America, but really all over the world. We're seeing it in the Pacific, everywhere, in Africa. And that comes with, it's a policy, but when you combine it with some of the restrictions that they have placed, that the government of China has placed on access to foreign exchange, then all of a sudden, that's where that Chinese underground banking comes into play, because it provides foreign currency outside of China that can be made available through underground banking and collaboration with criminal actors, with transnational criminal organizations, to get value out of China. And that is something that, obviously impacts a whole host of nations and issues in Latin America.
So I know, what a big issue this was in Canada. And I think we're talking about the same thing. And if you can extrapolate to Latin America from Canada, where you had basically drug money, drug cartel money, or either Chinese transnational criminals or other than who were working with the Chinese underground bankers, who people would go and they'd get sacks of cash and they'd go to the casinos and wash it that way, and then sometimes be able to put it into a check and put it into real estate. So I'm aware of that. I mean, how does it manifest itself in Latin America?
So that, what you're describing is what became known as the Vancouver model. And it involved casinos, real estate, organized crime, and corrupt Chinese officials. When you translate that into, when you look at Latin America, you have a lot of the same types of, you have the same parts of that Vancouver model. One of the things that we have seen is that this model, or Chinese underground banking, needs an additional source of supply of currency, of US dollars. And what we're seeing in Latin America is that Latin American criminal organizations, Mexican cartels, to be specific, have become the source of those dollars. So now that's how it begins to impact a lot of what's happening. And it's not just happening in Canada. Canada identified it. It's obviously very much part of what happens in the US, Australia, the UK. So really, it is a worldwide system.
And what kind of, I mean, this is obviously a little bit of a, not even a little bit, this is obviously a threat to governments, to civil society in Latin America, I would think, and maybe you can explain if that's true or how that would be, in the sense that you're talking about this illicit money going to, that may be spent in Latin America, what, for political corruption, for buying, for further funding illicit enterprises. What is some of the manifestation of the use of this money in Latin America?
You know, the key point of this is that currency is a commodity that can be bought and sold, and it is bought and sold. Legal currency is bought and sold. There are, you know, markets where it's bought and sold every day. What the Chinese underground banking and other underground bankings, the black market peso exchange, what we see with Venezuelan black market that was happening, and you know, throughout Latin America, is that these markets are providing an outlet for criminal organizations to sell that currency and then get the value out of it. And they're doing that not entirely outside of the formal financial system, which is what's worrisome. They are doing that through the formal financial system, and in ways that are not necessarily undetectable, but certainly require additional scrutiny when it comes to a lot of the transactions, and a lot of them involve international trade. So that combination of players are what can become, you know, a significant risk, not just for the financial sector, but the trade sector, and then obviously for public safety throughout the region.
And I think you've started to touch on it. We don't want to give away all the secret sauce, but can you give a few examples of some of the things that people are going to be needing to look out for in terms of seeing Chinese funds that are part of the Chinese underground banking system?
Yeah, well, the first thing would be Chinese influence in a particular nation. So throughout Latin America, the government of China has financed, the Bank of China has provided financing for major projects, you know, seaports, airports, highways, infrastructure type projects in a lot of these nations. That's the first thing you want to look at, because obviously with that, you're going to get government contracts. So then that goes into the corruption aspect of it. And it also goes into the fact that these are government loans. These are not grants. And so there is a mechanism by which these loans will have to be repaid. And so through that mechanism of contract fraud, and it's the primary way to have that, to get that money out. And from there, really following up all of the other following the trail of organized crime and what it's doing, how it's contributing. So there is a couple of different things, but it really does start with the influence that the government of China may be having in a particular nation through infrastructure projects as part of the Belt and Road Initiative.
But those deserve a close scrutiny. Well, let me also then go on to the other topic, or one of the other topics that you're going to talk about at the LATAM conference, and that is migration flows and their impact on money laundering in Latin America. What's the connection between migration flows and money laundering?
Well, everything happens for money, right? So there is a great amount of profit that comes from facilitating the movement of migrants. I think in Latin America, there's also a need to make sure that we understand the difference between human smuggling or movement of migrants and then the trafficking of individuals, which are both significant revenue sources for criminal organizations, but have different characteristics. We know that the criminal organizations are involved in both moving people, but the bigger organizations that control territories see that territory as a place where they can grant individuals permission to move migrants through and also profit. And it's also a crime that is not very heavily punished throughout the region, and even up to recently, and this may change, but even in the United States, it did not carry a very heavy penalty. So you're talking about an activity that is low risk and high reward, and that is always going to be attractive to criminal organizations.
And some of that money shows up. How it shows up?
It shows up in all sorts of ways, right? It'll show up in cash. It'll show up through a lot of the cash apps that are utilized.
Cash apps, this sort of thing. So
but you will be, but there's also cases of, for instance, and we've had these cases where we've had Major League Baseball players that have been involved in this and have had their contracts be part of these payoffs for these human smuggling organizations. So that is the other way to look at it. Like, look, these are sophisticated organizations that have sophisticated methods at their, at their disposal. And there's also a significant resource in terms of infrastructure. So, we have found that there's also hotel operators, transportation operators, lots of businesses and industries that are necessary in order for this crime to be able to succeed. And so that's another way to look at it in terms of looking at the risk and looking for those transactions. It's looking at the greater industry that is involved in the actual flow of these migrants.
So I know one of the other things that you're going to touch on, at least, maybe in a little bit of an informal way, is public-private partnerships in LATAM. What are you seeing there? What kind of encouragement can you bring to people at the conference about, partnerships with law enforcement and vice versa? What's the state of that?
Yeah, and it's tricky, right? Because it's very individual in terms of particular nations. But I think overall, the attendance at these types of conferences and the number of conferences that are organized throughout the region are a testament to to people being open to sitting down and collaborating, right? When we get down to sort of brass tacks and say, what are we going to share? Some legislations permit more sharing than others. But I think generally overall, I do see that those links and those relationships developing fairly well, as they have, in the United States. And I think I've been a proponent of saying, look, it's been a while, so now we need to take this relationship to the next step. Like, yes, we can trust each other. We know, the level of skill on both sides of the table has increased. So really now it's about saying, okay, what are we going to do to enhance this relationship? And that's really what the focus of that session is going to be about. Individual relationships are better than others, yes, but what's missing? What can we do to take this to the next level and really, sort of forge ahead in terms of what's coming in the next 5, 10 years, 15 years.
Well, I thought we were going to get to some other topics, but we've kind of run out of time, and maybe that'll be a way to keep our listening audience in suspense and get them to come to Cancun and go to the conference. I mean, I know there's also going to be panels on drug cartels and their designation as terrorist groups, protecting your institution against cyber threats, AML challenges associated with the World Cup, and jurisdictional collaboration in the fight against money laundering. And I think those are all topics that you probably would have something to say, but we're going to have to let people guess what you're going to say and really encourage them to be in Cancun. And I want to thank you, John, for setting the stage for Cancun.
It's a tough assignment, but you can count on me.
Thanks, John.
All right. Thank you.